Welcome to Pop and Locke. I'm Natalie Dowzicki. As a young child, for 7 Halloween nights in a row, my costumes all had a theme. My Grammy spent countless hours sewing together fabulous dresses, and some years my mom ruined my costume by making me wear sweatpants for warmth under my gowns. I was always a princess. I was even my favorite Disney princess 2 years in a row, and I'm still not ashamed of it. In 1937, when Snow White hit theaters, childhoods changed forever. In the studio today to discuss Disney's colossal and fabulous princess franchise is Washington Examiner's culture writer Madeline Fry.
Hi.
Editorial fellow at USA Today, Haley Victory Smith.
Hello.
And senior writer at the Foundation for Economic Education, Brittany Hunter.
Good morning.
Let's jump right in. So Disney has 3, let's call them eras of princesses. The Golden Era with Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty. The original 3, most people refer to them as, or trilogy. The Renaissance Era with Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, and Mulan. Some of my personal favorites, and the Modern Era with Tiana, Rapunzel, Merida. I always mess this one up. Merida. Mm-hmm. And unofficially Anna and Elsa, and Moana, my favorite. But let's take a step back. Can anyone tell me what is a princess?
In Disney terms, this is confusing because I would not consider Mulan a princess, to be honest with you. I was kind of not confused, but a little bit surprised to hear you say that because she was one of the few that was not a princess. I always think of Jasmine kind of being the stereotypical princess, or even Ariel, because she was an actual princess, but we've kind of just started using that interchangeably for females in the Disney, kingdom. So that's a good question. I don't know that I know the answer to.
So what would you describe as a princess then?
Disney princesses are whatever Disney wants them to be. I'm not one of those people that's like as big of a Star Wars nerd as I am. I'm not one of those people who insists that Princess Leia needs to be added to the princess canon. She is not a cartoon princess. She does not get to be a part of the canon. But I don't know. Yeah, there are several princesses that are not really princesses or aren't princesses until they marry a prince. So I don't know.
Well,
whatever.
I also wonder, do you think Disney sits down and has a meeting about, okay, this is where you get to lobby what can be officially called a Disney princess? Because from the research I was doing, apparently Elsa and Anna haven't made official Disney princess status yet.
I don't think so.
Really? Well, I don't. No, they haven't. So when you look up Disney's lineup and they put all the princesses on the same nice little picture that no one can copyright because they own everything.
Yes.
They don't include Elsa and Anna. They don't include Moana yet. But that could also be because their stories are still unfolding.
Isn't there an induction ceremony? Isn't that what happens? I feel like this is a thing.
Probably.
I guess.
It wouldn't, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me.
It's like a parade,
Would you all define princesses, Disney princesses specifically, because they basically defined the princess brand, as heroines or damsels in distress?
Heroines, unless we're talking early. I think the earlier ones, Cinderella, Snow White, and that just kind of reflects the culture, right? That was a little bit more of, I need this prince to come save me. I think in my era, when I was 5 or 6, when Beauty and the Beast came out, when Little Mermaid came out, that's where you saw them being a little bit more independent. You saw them reading or not wanting to be princess in Jasmine's case. So I think it's shifted a little bit over the years.
I think, too, kind of bouncing off of that idea is, like you said, we've come a really, really long way from the first princess that was a gorgeous teenager who literally just did chores and cleaned up for 7 men who were all over the place. So I think we've come a long way from that. And I think also that Disney might have taken a little bit of heat for always making the princesses damsels in distress. Do you think that type of heat is warranted? Should Disney care?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they, like you were saying, they started portraying the women as they always need a prince to save them. And then slowly they kind of went through an era where it was a little bit of both. And then you have some Disney princesses who are just heroines and they don't have to have anyone save them. I think that's probably why you like Moana a lot, is she's just very empowered and she doesn't need anybody to help her. But obviously it's a story and there are supporting characters and everything. But she very much is kind of she controls her own narrative, which is really cool. But I think Disney realized that for a long time, there were a lot of women who were watching the Disney princesses and saying, this is not the most feminist thing. And they probably respond to that a little bit from a sense of, oh, this will make more money if we make our characters more empowered. But it's also a good thing.
Yeah, I think, I want to push back on this just a little bit. I think that kind of the stories have evolved as society has evolved. I don't know that there was any one, even though it does kind of, differ based on the era. But I think each of these stories is not just, even I would say this about Snow White, is not just about this damsel in distress that needs saving. Each of these Disney princess stories, at its heart, I think, is like kind of this sort of great adventure tale, right? Where the girl, she goes out and she has this great adventure, and it's kind of a coming of age story for each one of these sort of classic fairy tales. And that's the other thing we have to keep in mind too, is that these are retellings, albeit, changed retellings of classic fairy tale stories. And of course they have evolved over time, but I don't know, so is society. And I just think it's not the original stories, which I don't think you guys were saying, the original stories are not unworthy because they were maybe less quote unquote feminist than the newer stories, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think we also have to remember that a lot of these stories, like you were just hinting at, aren't Disney originals, so to speak. Yeah. So like a lot of them come from the Brothers Grimm, which as original tales, as original fairy tales, are extremely dark.
Horrifying.
Yeah, extremely dark, and not something that you would really ever want on film or portrayed to a childhood audience. And I think Disney, when it first started its princesses, it had no idea, especially not in 1937, had no idea it was going to become the massive industry it is today. Something online, there was guesses online that like Disney princess merchandise alone is a $5.5 billion industry, which is not surprising, but like how many? Yeah, we have a little creature sitting on our table.
We have a friend
from Tangled.
So I have a stuffed Pascal sitting on my bed at home, and he was beckoning to come with me today, so I decided to bring him along. The viewers or the listeners cannot see him, but I'm sure they can sense his aura.
We'll post a picture of it too. Yeah. And I think, another element that you didn't mention too, that like these Disney stories tend to have, is it's always the movie's main character most of the time, not in all of them, is the princess, and except for Jasmine's case, she's not in theory the main character, but then again the movie is called Aladdin, so I don't know if we can really fault them for that, but they always have these cute sidekicks.
Yes.
And they're always going on this wild adventure. And I think the part of the reason that the like golden era princesses are looked at as like not really like resonating with the crowd today or with the young girls today is partially because they were made in a different time, right? The how women were viewed in that time period is a reflection maybe in those movies, but girls today aren't going to understand that because that's not the world they are currently growing up in. I don't know. You're giving me a look here. You don't think?
Okay, well, I don't want to like dominate this part of the conversation. But I think that girls still resonate with those early stories. We all grew up like playing princesses, right? Like on the playground at school. Absolutely. I think they still resonate because I do believe that there is something kind of inherent to the heart of women that desires to see the best in men. Okay, so the desire to be rescued by a man is not a wrong desire. Okay, I just don't think there's anything inherently bad about that. Of course, that shouldn't be like, we're just going to have men solve all our problems for us, or we're not going to learn to take care of ourselves. But I think that it's an inherently human thing to have that desire. And we always played kidnapper and rescuer, on the playground. And I think little girls still play those games. Maybe they don't resonate quite as much, but I think some of that might have to do more with the kind of graphic and visual elements of older films, than it does necessarily with the stories themselves.
And I think what you're kind of explaining is, Carl Jung talks about archetypes, the Jungian archetypes, and that's kind of what you're talking about. There is a female archetype, and there is that plays a role in all of our minds, whether or not we realize it or not. We're not, I disagree with John Locke in this aspect, we're not blank slates. We come with certain codes, with certain, inherent codes, and Joseph Campbell a lot talked about a hero's journey, and that plays into these Jungian archetypes. Yeah. So the reason that we do still resonate with these is because that does play a role in us as women. And for me, I don't necessarily, not necessarily, I've never called myself a feminist. So I tend to resonate with the older stories even more than I do with someone like Elsa, who I just don't really understand.
Yeah.
So that's something that I can agree with.
I think what was so brilliant about Disney doing Elsa and Anna in the Frozen series is they wanted to say, oh, we have this woman who doesn't need a man, but also everyone also still wants to see one of their characters end up with a guy. So they have the two women. One gets to be the empowered feminist that they want, and the other one gets to fulfill what people like actually still do want to see in a movie.
It's true. I think there's this book called Captivating, really great book, written by John and Stacey Eldridge. I think it's John Eldridge, yeah. And it kind of talks about sort of the heart of women and what do women desire, and at their depths of their soul, like what do women want? And there was this really interesting quote that Stacey writes. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but she says, "Before a doubt and accusation take hold, most little girls sense they have a vital role to play. They want to believe there is something in them that is needed and needed desperately, that they desire to play this kind of like irreplaceable role in a great adventure." And I think that's what little girls want. And I think that is demonstrated in all of these Disney princess films. I don't think there's a single exception to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And I think part of it is that Disney, let's call it, they have accentuated that adventure in the more recent films, so they've made it more apparent rather than Sleeping Beauty falling asleep and like having
she's
only
the one that maybe you couldn't include.
I like read something somewhere that like in that whole movie she only has like 18 lines or something.
Yeah.
So
like kind of dull lines. There's nothing like remarkable at anything she says.
Right. So I think Disney has done an exceptional job at accentuating that adventure or that need for adventure, whether it's Ariel feeling that like she has to like get out of her world and has to go see other things and doesn't want to be like the rest, which I think like independence is like a core part of these all these Disney princess movies. But do you think, or I'm kind of interested in your guys' take on which princesses are independent and why do you think that way?
I think they kind of all are. Like you were saying, even Snow White had to go out and do her own thing, right? It gets back to, like I said, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey thing about leaving the tribe or leaving where it is you came from. Yeah. Jasmine was a standout to me because here you have somebody who's born into privilege, who has everything, and she doesn't want it. And that's unheard of for young girls who think, I want to be a princess. I want to marry a prince. She does not want to marry a prince. She wants to go out and like make her own in the world. That doesn't end up happening exactly how she wants it. But that was huge for me as a 7-year-old watching that because I thought all I wanted was to be a princess. And here you have somebody who wants more.
Yeah. I mean, I was the same when I was little. I thought like I was going to be a princess. And like when I went to Disney World, I wanted to dress up and go get signatures from all the princesses. And it like integral part of my childhood. But I think at the same time, like when I was watching it at that age, mind you, memory's fuzzy, but I more looked at the story arc than I did about the actual characters and like the agency or independence they were showing. And I think some of the stories more recently, especially, show that women can be independent, have strong and fierce attitudes, and they're more than just the focus. And I think, well, if we're going back to Frozen too, I think it's kind of... You don't like Frozen?
Not the best.
I'm not a fan of Frozen either.
Oh, I love Frozen.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'm just bitter about it because in many ways it dethroned my favorite Disney film, which is Tangled. And it just
Tangled is
overshadows Tangled, and Tangled is the quality film. So
I'm
sorry, I get a little passionate about this stuff.
See, I don't think I've ever even seen Tangled because I just like wasn't. But I think I've got some years on both of you, so I think that's probably why.
Fair enough.
Still enjoy it. That's your homework.
Okay, I'll have to watch it. Yes.
Homework. So what I was going to say is I think in Frozen particularly, there's this element of Elsa is not ashamed to hide what makes her special. And I know that sounds kind of odd, but like she has these powers that at first she like hides with gloves and all that good jazz. And then she was like, no, wait, like this could actually be good if I can like hone my skills, so to speak, with my magical frost. But I think that was the first time at least I've seen in a Disney princess movie where they weren't hiding what made them special and it forces us to think about how independent Elsa is. Now, Anna, it's interesting to contrast them, though, because Anna is very not confident in herself and is very worried about, like, keeping her relationship with her sister. And the romance in this story, so to speak, is sisterhood, not necessarily damsel in distress type romance. And I just think it's interesting. I don't know. Did you guys find any other instances where any of the princesses really exhibited agency or like a strong sense of independence?
I think in Mulan, she goes through this experience kind of that Elsa does, and it takes her longer, almost the whole movie, that she has to hide who she is, that she's a woman, but she's in combat fighting so that she can save her dad, and she's doing this for her family. But it's not till the end that she's able to reveal who she is, and then also has earned the trust of people that she's come to know and is able to save the day. So she gets to have both in the end, but it takes her longer. And I think that that's really interesting to watch that process, which I guess for Elsa also, she leaves early in the movie, but then there's still kind of a conflict there. And then finally she's accepted at the end.
I feel like Belle's a good example of this, too, in a different way. In that, and this comes from my own experience, where it was hiding intellect. Oh, I don't want to be smart because the boys aren't going to like me. And here you have Gaston, who thinks she's beautiful, but thinks it's really silly that she would read a book with no pictures, you know? And so Belle's not necessarily wanting to hide it. She's always been more fiercely independent than I think other Disney princesses may have been in the beginning. But there's this feeling of, oh, no, there is somebody who's going, just like she had to learn to love the Beast for who he was, the Beast loved her, even though she was a woman with her own brain, you know? So there's a little bit of that going on there.
Of all of these films, in my opinion, the one that you could maybe argue is the least feminist is The Little Mermaid in a certain way, because she gives up her voice to it's like a feminist, like what their horror nightmare scenario could dream up for a princess story. This would be it. Like, gives up her voice to chase a man she barely knows, and then the worst part is they have to kiss for her to get her voice back. Like, it's just a whole thing. But the interesting thing about this is that in the end, she does have to give up her life in the sea in order to be with Prince Eric. And that was something that I didn't consider until adulthood, that like, I mean, I guess I'd kind of thought of this as a kid, but that she doesn't get to have both. And so it's that idea of kind of leaving the tribe, right? That in the end, she ultimately does have to sacrifice something in order to have kind of her fairy tale ending. I think it's actually one of the few, although Disney doesn't really highlight this fact, is one of the few Disney films where the character in the end doesn't actually get to have it all. She kind of does have to, compromise a little bit.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I had written a question about, is there an issue or a problem with stories always ending with, and then they lived happily ever after?
Yes and no. Yes, because that's not life, right? And as somebody who has been married and divorced, I can tell you that's not what happens. But the interesting thing about that is that's what we want to see in a story. We want to see the happy ending because life is hard. Life is suffering. We don't want that portrayed. We want to go home at the end of seeing this movie and think, okay, there's some good in the world. There's some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that that's really important for us, especially as young kids. Otherwise, we're going to be set up for failure and disappointment. So
yeah, you don't want to tell your 8-year-old, life sucks. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I think kids realize pretty quickly that life is not going to be all, unicorns and rainbows. I, as a kid, so between the ages of 7 and 8, so within the course of a year, I had 3 grandparents pass away. So I experienced, quite a bit of grief at a very early age. I get a little frustrated when Hollywood elites, and as someone who studied in Southern California, I think I can say that, Hollywood elites, when they tell me what real life is, how do you know what real life is? I mean, you do, but not real life. And I don't know that I think you're exactly right. When we come to the movie theaters, we want to see movies that end well. I oftentimes, if I knew a movie is going to end poorly and I'm going to be sad, I don't watch it. I had times growing up where I asked my mom to watch a movie before I did, so that if it ended badly, I didn't have to watch it, because I just have no desire to put myself through that,
Did you guys see Into the Woods?
Yes. I'm a Broadway theater or musical theater enthusiast. So That's, yeah.
I was thinking about that, though. I didn't really like it because I didn't see it on Broadway, but I saw the Disney adaptation, which came out in 2014. Yep. And I think it's really interesting to watch as an adult, but I would see kids in the theater and I would think, why would you take your kid to see this? Because it basically takes all of these fairy tales and then Prince Charming cheats on Cinderella. And it's just very sad. And it's not the kind of thing you want to see as a child. The point is there are no happy endings, really.
Right. It's closer to the original stories than it is to the Disney versions, which I think are a product of capitalism. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's probably a good thing that these classic fairy tales were kind of transformed into these classic stories. The film that made me really mad recently was La La Land. La La Land did not need to end poorly, folks. They could have had a happily ever after, and they didn't, and I'm still bitter about it, and that's why I've only seen it once.
I don't think there's necessarily a problem, like you were saying, from an entertainment standpoint. And they lived happily ever after is like a heartwarming feeling, yes. Right? And no one wants, I mean, yes, I do go to movies that make me scared or cry, whatever, but like that's not what I'm expecting from a Disney princess movie. You know what I mean?
So like to forget reality for a little bit.
Right. So
and in this next Disney movie, it's going to end in death.
Yeah. So like you go in with the expectation that you're not going to like have the same feelings you would have if you went to go see The Conjuring or Joker, right? Yeah. So I think like part of it is like in keeping with like the legacy of the story arc in general. But do you think, going back to what you were saying, interesting about like the Hollywood elite or even a lot of stars in general seem to give very strong opinions towards our older Disney princess films and older Disney films in general. Some have said, I'm blanking on which actress had said this, wasn't letting her children watch The Little Mermaid.
Yes, this just happened.
Yes, this was recently. And there's been a few other actresses who have said that, partially just because of the, like you were saying, like at the very core, this is the story's message. But do you think that is okay? And do you think Disney should care?
I think it's absurd. And this is coming from someone, I don't even want kids. Like, I'm not even like somebody who's like, oh my goodness, think of the children. And like I said, I'm not like a feminist. Yeah. But like, just let your kids watch the movie. They're not going to be completely switched, over to some right-wing political philosophy or something because Ariel has to kiss a guy to break the spell. So I think people like having a cause. This is the main problem with Hollywood elites.
Yes.
People love to get outraged and they love to have a cause. And now that we have, like Elsa is such a radical juxtaposition from Ariel, that you have these, okay, this is better for my lifestyle, and people are going to get angry no matter what. But I think it's so absurd.
On the flip side, I was like sort of allowed to watch The Little Mermaid growing up. I grew up in a very conservative household, and she wore a bikini. And she was very rebellious to her and disrespectful to her parents.
Interesting.
So
that is right. Because she like runs away.
Yeah. So I did end up watching it, and it didn't, I think I'm okay today. So I think any of the Disney films are totally fine to show to your kids, but some of them you may want to have a conversation about, oh, should they have done this thing? How could it have been better? And that's a way to participate in the culture and then also be able to evaluate these stories that we tell each other.
And kind of going down that road, so a majority of our Disney princesses are like flawless. They're young. Their originals are all white, abnormally thin. Like, I've seen those like dolls that have tried to, like, if you took the animation and put it into real life, like what the person would actually look like. And is there a message that sends to young girls? Do you think representation matters in these types of movies?
I don't. And I think we forget that Jasmine was ahead of her time. Jasmine is not a white princess, and nobody seems to remember that. It kind of goes like, oh, blonde princesses. Haven't had a blonde princess in a while, by the way, aside from Elsa. But I think it's the same as I would say with Barbies and with the Happy Ever After. We're not escaping or playing pretend or seeing these movies to reinforce what's going on in real life. That's not the purpose of entertainment.
They're fairy tales.
They're fairy tales. And I'm just going to be blunt. I don't want to see somebody who isn't necessarily beautiful representing a Disney princess. I want to go in for 2 hours, think everything is great, and there's even a comfortable conflict. It's nothing where someone's going to die at the end unless it's the bad guy. I like going and seeing beauty on screen, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
So I have a friend who has an adopted little girl from India, and she, from a very early age, gravitated towards dolls that looked like her. And she wanted toys that looked like her, which makes sense. You know, little girls like to see themselves represented. When we played Disney princesses in school, I don't know about y'all, but for us, most of the time, you played the Disney princess that you looked like. You know, you had the same hair color as. No, you can't be this princess because you don't look like them. And I think, I don't know, that's just something that I think is really integral to this. I also think, particularly on The Little Mermaid, there's the new film coming out where, I'm forgetting the name of the actress, but
she was in Greatest Showman, right? Isn't it that?
No, it's not Zendaya. It's not
Okay.
Zendaya. It's a different actress.
She and her sister are singers, but I can't remember her name.
Yes. Regardless of who it is, she is African American. And I am actually really excited about this. And the reason is because there's extreme disparities in the United States among victims of accidental drowning. And this is one of the top causes of death for children in the United States. And so in African American communities, particularly because they were not allowed in public pools for so long or were segregated, there are lots of people in the Black community who never learned how to swim. And so their children subsequently didn't learn how to swim either. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. And I am hopeful that with this new film, there will be lots of little Black girls out there who see her and decide, like, I want to learn how to swim, and maybe ask their parents, can I get swimming lessons this summer? And because I always played like mermaids in the pool in the summer, you know, when I was a kid. And I'm hopeful that that will be something that's encouraging to other young girls.
So I think, well, part of it is too, like, all of us sitting here, we all look like some of the princesses that exist, right? So I think there's a little bit of inherent bias in that. So, like, I agree with Haley in the sense that I think it's important that there's representation in the sense that, like, little girls can look and see, like, oh, that could be me because she looks like me or because she talks like me, or I think that is extremely important. So from an entertainment perspective, like, Moana is a great example of this. First Polynesian princess. I also love the music in that movie.
So Lin-Manuel Miranda, right?
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Love it. And I think that was the first. Well, Tiana didn't do as well in the theaters, the Princess and the Frog. Moana certainly did better. I think it was the first time that, like, little girls saw a princess that wasn't thin, that was just, like, normal stature, average. When I say average looking, she's still beautiful, but like
She's
average.
realistic.
Yeah, she's realistic. And I think that's what's important is, like, I agree that from an entertainment standpoint, it's great to see someone that's beautiful, but I think we need to be realistic about that beauty, right? And I don't think, just like we're having that conversation with what a model should look like and how that shows women or females and how it's, like, grossly affecting the way girls feel about themselves, especially at a young age. I think it's important that we're realistic in our representation. Because there are some, like, there are some movies, like we were talking about this in the Star Wars episode too, that there are strong fan bases that think that certain movies should look a certain way. So the Star Wars fan base is a great example of this because there are Star Wars fans sector that doesn't think that women or females should be Jedi, and we were talking about anyway, so
sorry.
So I think it's important that movies like this, and especially movies that are geared towards females, Disney Princesses has female written all over it, that there's accurate representation.
Yeah, I think representation really does matter, and conservatives don't like to say that. People on the right don't like to say that because they think that means, identity politics or something. But it's not about hitting quotas. It's just about telling stories about people who are going to be listening to those stories and watching those movies. And it's important also, Disney has been able to have a lot of non-white actresses who may not have been able to have roles in the Disney franchise because they have had characters like Jasmine and Mulan and Moana, who they specifically were looking for, I think, like an unknown, like a new young actress.
My hobby horse about this is more realistic hair expectations from the Disney films. Now, this is coming from someone who Rapunzel is my favorite princess, but here's the thing that's unrealistic about her hair. It is not the length, it is the thickness, okay? So when you look at her hair, it's like it takes up like her whole head, you know? Her braid does not taper. It is one thickness, and that it's very unrealistic, and it makes me very sad. So yeah, more realistic hair expectations for Disney.
I think, well, kind of, and jumping off of what Madeline said as well, I think that if we're Disney, I don't want Disney to participate in like tokenism, right? So I don't want it to be, okay, we had our one Polynesian princess, now we're going to have our one, and we're going to just move down the line. Yeah. I'd rather them pick the best actress, right? And if, like, I suspect has happened for the live action remake of Little Mermaid, they had all of these people get interviews and get auditions, and they picked the best actress. Yes, the public outcry was a little bit unsettling, to be honest. But I think I would like to see the best actress for the best entertainment. And that, because in our mind, yes, I think I know the Little Mermaid has red hair, and that's just something I've seen because that's what I have been seeing since I was 7 years old. But I think it doesn't matter. I think they're telling the story, and we're still going to get a good story out of it, and we're still going to have the good actress. So it doesn't matter. Like, anyone can be put into this role.
It's funny you say that, because when the live action Beauty and the Beast came out, I was a little bad because she was not a real brunette. Because, like, as a little girl, that was my thing, right? Yes. Belle was a brown-haired, like, you know, and then you had, what's her, Emma Watson.
Oh, I love her, though.
She's wonderful. She's not a singer. She should never have been allowed to sing.
Well, yeah.
But she's somebody who's kind of blondish, right? And I'm thinking, like, this is not my Disney princess. And I don't know that she was necessarily the right one for the role, but Little Mermaid excites me because, again, like you said, the singing talent is what excites me. Is I'm like, okay, this person's going to do a really great portrayal.
Did you see the doll that they created for Emma Watson? It was horrifying.
I did not see that.
I saw it at Disneyland, and it was so bad. I don't know how that got approved, but anyway, side note.
All right, so I pulled out some quotes for some of the movies, and I just kind of wanted to get your feedback / if you remember these quotes being said. And
pop quiz.
No, we have trivia later. We couldn't have done this. We couldn't have done this episode without trivia.
Yes.
Okay, so in Aladdin, Jasmine says, "How dare you, all of you, standing around deciding my future? I am not a prize to be won." So does that surprise you that came out of that movie?
No.
It doesn't?
At that era, no.
Okay.
No, yeah.
So I was doing a little bit of research on Jasmine because she's one of my favorites. And apparently they had originally written her as kind of bratty. And then they were like, oh, no, wait, that's a terrible idea. She needs to be the strong, empowered woman. And that's what she ended up becoming, which they take that even a step further in the new live action remake, if you've seen that. But she was definitely a product of the, I think it is the 90s is when the film came out, is that kind of female empowerment. She wants to, take control of her own life kind of thing.
And like we mentioned earlier, she's the only one that doesn't necessarily want to be a princess. It's kind of like forced upon her, which is like interesting because all the little girls watching want to be her. So the next one I had was in Moana, Maui, who is obviously not Moana, who's the Rock, says, "If you wear a dress and have an animal sidekick, you're a princess." So do you think they played a little, were they playing a little bit funny at the more traditional princess movies? Because remember, Moana is convinced she's not a princess. She's like a great adventurer. She's this sailor learning to be a sailor. And she has this cool sidekick. Hey, he's a chicken. It's funny. But and he's always trying to drown himself. So I think, like, how do you think that, is Disney making fun of their own stereotype?
Absolutely. Which, good for them. Like, that's just a good marketing ploy because you're appeasing people who maybe didn't hate that model to begin with because you're giving them a callback. And then, people who might be a little bit more on the feminist side or more female empowerment side are going to get a kick out of that. So that's just good capitalism.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, good. So a lot of the conversation we've been having has been about female empowerment through the Disney princess movies. Do you think the Disney princess movies need to be about female empowerment?
It's weird that you mentioned the Aladdin thing, and Hercules maybe would be the other example, but even though these had boy names and they were about men, I never considered them movies for boys. I've always kind of felt like the entire genre has been for little girls because there is always this amazing female character. So yeah, that's an interesting question you bring up. I'm not sure.
But I feel like if you set out to make a movie about female empowerment, it's going to be terrible.
Yes.
You're going to be super preachy. But if you want to make a movie about a kind of realistic in the sense of the way people actually act about a woman, then it's going to be empowering and it's going to be a good film.
I think, all of these films are like we said earlier, about kind of the great adventure, right? Like the girl goes out and has the great adventure. I think that is naturally about female empowerment. I don't think you have to force it to be about female empowerment. It is. And so I think Maddie is right to say, you set out on that mission. It's just, oh, that's going to be bad. Don't do that.
And I think too, like with the adventure aspect, especially with these later films, they are actually, this happened in The Little Mermaid too, though. They encourage, or not encourage, but they recognize that there are sacrifices that need to be made. Like you have to make sacrifices and there are trade-offs in the decisions you make, which I think are important because you had said earlier about The Little Mermaid sacrificing her voice, which, well, yeah, that's kind of bad. But like there's a realistic aspect to that not everything you want to do or everything you want to accomplish is going to come without sacrifice. What other sacrifices do you think princesses have made?
So the interesting one for me has been, so I'm going to talk about Tangled for a sec because
go ahead. We want to hear your whole diatribe.
It's my favorite. So Tangled to me is really interesting because it kind of follows the classic, in a way, but in a different way, the classic Disney trope of not having a mother. So now, side note, I heard that apparently this is a rumor, the reason why Walt Disney decided so many times to not have a maternal character was because apparently he like bought a house for his parents and the furnace leaked one evening and his mother passed away and his father survived. And so I guess apparently the rumor is like he was so haunted by that story that or not a story, like his life, that he decided not to include these maternal characters. But in Rapunzel, it's interesting that the way it's different is that the mother character is not her mother, obviously, and is abusive. I think it's a classic example of emotional child abuse. And do you guys know who Gypsy Rose Blanchard is?
Yes.
Okay, so for the listeners who may not know, this is the girl whose mother lied to her about being sick for so many years and like kept her locked up and like told her she had all these terrible diseases, and eventually she just didn't see any other way out, and so she asked the boy she was talking to online to like kill her mother for her. And she has said that Tangled is her favorite Disney movie. Makes sense because it's basically her life.
I did not know that.
Yes,
oh my gosh.
Yes. And so she has this whole interview that she's done about it. And the idea that for Rapunzel, what she has to do is she basically makes the sacrifice of this mother character. You see at the end when Mother Gothel, she gets tripped by Pascal and she falls out the window. Rapunzel, in this like really interesting moment, they don't have any dialogue about it. It's like very subtle, but at the same time very apparent. She reaches for her as she's falling out the window, and it's like still this woman who has just like attempted to murder the love of her life. She still loves her, but ultimately she kind of has to make that sacrifice. And I don't know. I just have found that really interesting.
It's also interesting how they highlight. I hadn't thought about that scene. I just watched it last night with the kids I babysit, but I hadn't thought about that scene more so. But it's also interesting now that you talk about it that it's showing conflict that she's having in her mind, right? So she's like around 16, 17-ish?
No, she's 18 because the film is about her 18th birthday.
Oh, yes, yeah. You're right. So she's 18, and so she's spent the last 18 years considering that this Mother Gothel is like her mom, and they have like a great relationship.
Yep.
She's confused why she's stuck in this tower, which shouldn't have taken 18 years to figure out, but whatever. But like it's interesting because the mother she sees in her head isn't how she now sees her, and I think that's an interesting conflict, and it's another great example of the princesses having to make hard decisions or coming across conflict, sacrifice in order to achieve what they want in the end. Does anyone else have any other examples of that? I mean, Sleeping Beauty just falls asleep.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm drawing.
Like Snow White gets a better life after cleaning for the dwarfs or whatever, and getting woken up by a prince. So yeah, it doesn't seem...
She also has to like... In a weird way, it's actually... she has to be really brave because she's facing up to her
to
the evil
stepmother.
queen, evil stepmother. Yeah, sorry. I always misremember if like the woman was her stepmother. I haven't seen it in so long, but she does have to like be brave and stick up to her. And also in the show, why am I forgetting the name of it? Once Upon a Time. Yes,
good show.
Super good the first couple seasons, and then but they make Snow White obviously in that series into, I think, a much more a character with much more agency, which was a word you used as we were discussing this.
Yeah, a dynamic character for
sure.
Yes. And I think part of it too, and even we haven't mentioned it yet, but Disney's starting to do these remakes and like coming up with niche stories that were in their Disney princess like world. So like Maleficent is a good example of that, right? So like we were just talking about Sleeping Beauty. There wasn't like a whole lot that like went on in that movie other than her falling asleep and needing to be saved. But they've made a few movies now that I think they're on their second one about Maleficent, which is fascinating. I mean, I really like Angelina Jolie, but I think it's fascinating to look at how they're like spinning off of their original movies, partially because they show so much background to Maleficent about like the struggles and stuff she had as a childhood and stuff we would have that was never thought of and would never have been recognized for someone that was evil in an original movie. So what do you guys make of all these remakes, of these live actions? Are they adding value to the originals? Are they just trying to do lip service to the fans? What do you think?
I think they're playing off nostalgia. Nostalgia is a huge moneymaker, especially right now. You have to consider, especially with these movies, millennials are having kids now. Millennials went to see these movies as children. Now we have a reason to take our kids to see these movies and get them to like, the same things we liked. And so I think it's 100% a play on nostalgia, and good on them. I mean, I don't necessarily think everyone is a success or that they should be made. Sometimes I'm like, stop ruining my childhood. But I think it's a great moneymaker. So, yeah.
Speaking more broadly about Disney, something like over half of the top 10 films that were released last year were all Disney films. And most of them were the remake of The Lion King, all of these just, either remakes or spin-offs of something that's already in their franchise. So they've definitely been investing more in their old stories than their new stories because they know that people are familiar with that and they have that nostalgia factor. But I haven't seen as much of the remakes, and that's what personally doesn't interest me, so I can't speak to that as much.
Same.
Yeah.
I've only seen 2 of the remakes. I saw the 2 of the princess ones. I saw Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella, and I thought they were both fantastic. I think one of the things they've done really well is the visual elements in these films are really stunning. The costumes and I felt like the casts they've used as well for these films have been pretty good. I personally, the remakes are not a huge draw for me unless, I kind of see the trailer and it, I don't know, tickles my fancy and I'd like to go. I wish though Disney would spend a little more time on creating new stories. I mean, obviously they're doing that as well, but we haven't had a new princess in a little bit. I think that Disney kind of went all in for Frozen for a little while. And I it's like everyone's saying like all the movies are sequels now. Like no one's creating anything new. I wish we would do that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think it's twofold, right? So I think a remake for them is safe, which I don't think is a good thing for creativity. So when I saw Beauty and the Beast. Mainly the big draw for me seeing that was Emma Watson. Wasn't actually the movie. And I've also seen the remake of Aladdin, which is interesting because Jasmine gets a little bit more screen time and they develop her character more. But I think a big thing is Disney knows it's safe, knows people are familiar with the story, and there's enough of a generational divide, like you were hinting at, that now millennials will take their children to go see the movies they saw as kids. That's why they keep doing these Toy Story movies and then releasing them with really weird wait times. But I think it's safe. But I think for creativity, like you were hinting at, it really hurts. Partially because we want to see new movies, audiences want to see new movies. But Disney ultimately is not, unless they come up with another Frozen, not a sequel to Frozen, like another movie of that magnitude, it's going to take a long time for them to recoup the benefits from that. So I am optimistic that we're going to see a new princess in the future, but I think it might take, it takes a lot of development time. And Disney has, at this point, it's a capitalist machine, right? So it has its hands in not that that's a bad thing. It has its hands in a lot of different worlds. And especially now that we have Disney Plus, I'm going to watch even more of the remakes, but so that's only a side note. I think because it has its hands in so much, its original content, like what it was founded on, is not getting as much focus, if that makes sense. So like they're worrying about Star Wars and paying lip service to that huge fan base, and we've got Avatar now, which I never thought they should have bought or made sequels for, but
not interested.
Yeah, that movie also cost like $5 billion to make, and they're in so many universes now that I think they're getting plenty enough money to not make another Disney princess movie, is what I'm trying to say.
Do you guys like any of the sequels?
Okay, yeah, I was actually going to say that because I kind of dissed spin-offs, but I have actually really liked all of the remakes that I've seen of the Disney princesses, because I feel like they've taken the good elements of the stories and then updated them in a way that didn't seem preachy, but also seemed a little bit more modern. I especially liked Cinderella. Beauty and the Beast was good. Aladdin was really good.
But like of the cartoon sequels, are there any where you're like,
oh, the sequels?
I like that one.
I remember liking Return of Jafar as a kid, but that was so long ago.
I forgot those were a thing.
I did. Now maybe this was just because Ariel was my favorite princess growing up.
Yeah, they made a second one of that, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
She had a daughter.
Yeah. And okay, now I've been saying that she wasn't able to have her life in the sea and on land. The reason I know this is because in the sequel, it's this whole big thing that she's going back to the sea to, spoiler alert, go after her
This
daughter.
movie's been out for a while.
Yeah, to go after her daughter. And I loved it as a kid. Now, maybe that's just because, you're a kid and you like to see your favorite characters again in, a new story, which I think is probably why Frozen 2, was a good idea for Disney. Maybe now watching it as an adult, it wouldn't be as entertaining, but I really liked it as a kid. I thought it was great.
I honestly forgot there were sequels to a lot of those. And now I'm just recalling that there was
Some
a
of them
Beauty and the
have
Beast
good
Christmas
songs,
one.
Yes, but they never went to theaters, and I think that's why for me they didn't have the magic, right? I remember seeing Little Mermaid in the theater when I was 5 years old, and I remember just wow, seeing Ursula become giant and die on screen was so terrifying for me. But then when the other one came to video, I was like, oh, this is just my TV at home.
To VHS.
Yeah, to VHS.
There's a second Mulan that's pretty good. I think there are some fun songs that come out of the sequels. There are a couple really good songs in the second Mulan, and in the Broadway versions of these Disney films. The Broadway version of Aladdin has a few really good songs.
Same with Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, the song "Proud of Your Boy." Oh
yeah.
my gosh, you cannot listen to that song without crying. Very, very good stuff.
And I think that's something we didn't hit on earlier, but a lot of these movies, a large fan base comes from the music, right? And they spend a ton of time developing and coming up with correct music that makes sense.
Alan Menken.
Yeah.
Genius.
And they deserve a ton of credit. As much as some of us don't like Frozen, Let It Go,
Let It Go's a great. So, and I think the fact
she
that
was screeching.
I love that actress. Idina Menzel is a goddess.
She's amazing. It's Idina Menzel. I love her.
Yeah.
I'm going to say just really fast that I think Tangled has the best soundtrack. And I think that the song with the ruffians where they're listing out their dreams, yes! And when they list out what their side hustles are, if their day job is being a thug, but what their side hustle is, and then the line is the best, which is, it's kind of a throwaway line, but it's so good. Call us brutal, sick, sadistic, and grotesquely optimistic. But way down deep inside, we have a dream. So good. Anyway, I have to get as much Tangled content in there as I can.
We'll definitely have to put a picture of Tangled on this.
Thank you.
All right, so I thought it would not be appropriate to talk all this Disney and not do a little bit of trivia.
I won't look.
Yeah, don't look at the answers.
Okay.
Jeez. Okay. There's actually 2 Tangled questions on here. So, all right. So, number 1, can you guess which Disney princess movie has made the most money for Disney, and how much money did it make? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think it's Frozen.
Okay. How much money?
I'm so bad at this. Let's do $2 billion.
You're close. It was $1,072,402,000.
Yeah.
The second one, the next highest grossing was Moana, box office sales.
Okay. So we're not including merchandise.
Not including merchandise, yeah. The next one was Moana, $643,331,111.
That surprises me. I wouldn't have pegged Moana as being the next one. But I guess that makes
after
sense.
that was Tangled, 591,794,936.
I kind of wonder, to be honest, so because I come from Broadway world, the two that you mentioned have crossover in Broadway world because Lin-Manuel Miranda and Idina Menzel, that I'm wondering if
That's
that brings
true.
in new fans who will see it that like where they wouldn't normally have seen it.
So does Tangled, because there are a couple characters in it. I can't remember the names besides like the main actresses, but there are or main actors. But there's one voice actor in it who has a little broad. I can't remember. Sorry, that's a side note. But
you're fine.
Yeah.
So the next one, who is depicted as the youngest Disney princess? Go ahead.
Moana?
Nope.
Ooh,
Is it Snow White?
It's
Yes.
That was my
Oh.
second
Alice
guess.
is not Alice is not a princess,
Yeah.
right? Because I looked at Alice like, wait, she's not.
She doesn't have an animal sidekick.
That was my
That's
second
right.
choice.
She doesn't have an animal
It's a
sidekick.
weird cat.
Like, also, you realize how old that film is if you go back and watch it, and they've even like remastered the animation.
It's
It
bad.
still looks bad. Yeah. Interesting. The voice actress for her only made $1,000 off that movie.
Such an iconic voice too. It's not
Yeah.
my favorite, but very recognizable.
Yeah. All right. So, which Disney princess is the only one, we mentioned this earlier, to not be her film's main character?
Oh,
Jasmine.
Jasmine, right? Yeah.
This one's kind of fun. Which Disney princess has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame?
Snow White.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
She was also the only Disney princess that Walt was alive for when the movie came out.
Really?
Right, because Cinderella's the 60s.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
I did not know that.
So Cinderella was his favorite princess. Like, he had come up with the concept and everything of her.
Yeah.
And like, there's pictures of him standing next to the drawings of her, but he was not alive when it came
So
out.
then I wonder if this rumor then is true about like the
so
characters.
I had heard after they remade The Lion King, I had heard that
characters not having mothers, which specifies what I'm
characters
thinking.
not having parents in general was
Yeah.
something Walt wanted.
Interesting.
Oh,
Like
that's kinda
there's this idea that
I
like
know.
that
Very dark.
that if a female character doesn't have a mother, that she's like kind of forced to grow up faster.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long is Rapunzel's hair entangled? And
How long?
Yeah, and how many animators did it take to animate it?
When we're talking about length, are we meaning like what's the ratio here?
So this was on like Disney's website. I know. So they like think they know everything about their films. But
Okay, well, I'm just going to give it a guess,
go ahead.
if that's okay. I think her hair, but it changes length throughout
Yeah.
the film. It definitely does. I'm going to guess like 20 feet.
her hair is 70 feet long, and it
Whoa.
took 30
Yes.
engineers to animate
Yes,
it.
I had heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Insane.
And that's the most animators that Disney has used for a single like aspect of one of their films.
Makes sense.
Um,
That hair
yeah,
has a
it
life
was
of
worth
its
it.
own.
It was worth it.
One unsung non-Disney princess that deserves a shout out for being independent is Esmeralda, and granted Hunchback is one of my favorite musically, that she doesn't get enough recognition for being who she is, because she's not a princess. She's literally a homeless gypsy. But
Right.
credit where credit is due.
Who's the Megara?
Megara is also good,
In
yeah.
Hercules. She's definitely like not a princess
Yeah.
per se, but she is in the canon sometimes.
Yeah.
Also, Maid Marian from Robin Hood.
Yes.
She's a fox, but you know.
Yes.
Hey, still counts.
I'm trying to think. Is there anyone else?
I don't think there's any. Well, the recent articles I was reading was trying to argue that like they were using all females from Star Wars. So like Princess Leia came not from Star Wars, from Disney. Princess Leia should be a princess, like an official Disney princess. Then like the girl from Wreck-It Ralph, I'm blanking on her name, but like
Vanellope something.
and like technically, if you look at her story, like her story is all about adventure, and Ralph is her like sidekick.
She's not.
But no.
Well,
not
if
buying
the
it.
rule is you have to wear a dress and have a pet companion, Leia does not qualify for this because her companion is a droid.
That's right. Thanks for listening. As you may have noticed, there is quite a debate over which Disney princess should rule them all. If you want to campaign for your favorite Disney character, be sure to let us know on Twitter at Pop and Locke Pod. That's Pop, the letter N, Locke with an E, Pod. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We look forward to unraveling your favorite show or movie next time. Pop and Locke is produced by Tess Terrible and Landry Ayers as a project of libertarianism.org. To learn more, visit us on the web at www.libertarianism.org.